Okay, we are, yes, we are live. Oops, we, yeah, we'll be live soon. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the last interview of the day. We're going to speak with a challenge that many parents raising children with Arabic are facing. I got loads of questions about regarding Arabic. It was about this topic, and it's so because it's a diglossic language, meaning that the written language and the spoken language are different, like different languages. It is difficult for a child to understand what they are reading, even if they can already read the script. And because it is like learning a new language, it might not be as motivating for the children um, who don't live in an Arabic speaking country. And so therefore don't see the point maybe of putting so much effort in learning to read and write. Um, and so, for example, as a teenager, I remember that even if Japanese is not a diglossic language, I felt the same. So there wasn't Japanese around me in the environment. Uh, and I was wondering why I was putting so much effort learning to read and write all these Chinese characters. So I can totally understand the position. And but so the consequence is that children don't benefit from everything reading in the home language or any other language can bring, like the expansion of the vocabulary, etc. And to talk about this, I'm very honored to have Dr. Riham Shendy with us. So before we go on to the questions, I would like to introduce Dr. Shandy. So you are an applied economist by education and profession, and prior to having children, you worked in the field of economic development. In the last 5 years, you refocused your interests and have conducted academic research on mother tongue education and child literacy in Arabic. And during those 5 years, you have published 6 books in Egyptian Arabic, and we're going to talk more about why Egyptian Arabic and not standard Arabic or Fusha. Um, and so we can find you on your website, which is www.tuta-tuta.com. So welcome, Riham. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
And so I would like to start from the beginning. Can you please explain what was your own experience of learning to read and write in Arabic, so in Fusha? And then maybe you can talk about your children for whom it's a bit different.
So I grew up in Egypt, in Cairo, and went to a regular school. And I learned Arabic from kinder, as long as I remember. It always felt more difficult. I was a clever kid, so it was the weakest language I had. And I never understood why. Maybe I'm also probably naturally not gifted in languages so much, but it didn't feel like, oh, this is just my language, Arabic, I'm just learning it. It felt like a difficult language. And but then you learn it and you go through high school and then I never had any reflections. I didn't know it was a diglossic language. I never noticed like consciously, oh, I'm talking different than I'm reading. You just take it as a given. Arabic is difficult and the school is difficult. Okay. And that was kind of how I grew up and my relationship to the language. I never ended up using it at work because I ended up working in Egypt in English. And then I had a revisiting of what Arabic is when I had my kids. It was a very different eye on how the language is. But growing up, I was just like everybody else, studying it in school and just doing Fusha as the written language.
Okay, so before you talk about your children, would you be able to explain, because we have teachers as well who are following us, not just parents, teachers who work in international schools, for example, where they have children from different languages. How different is Fusha from the dialectal Arabic?
So it's quite different. It depends on which country. Every country has its own dialect, and within even the country, there's variation. But I'm going to simplify and just assume that every country has its own dialect. Some dialects are closer than others. people tend to think that Syrian and Yemeni colloquial Arabics are closer. Darja in the Maghrib, in the like Morocco and Algeria is further away. It's people argue this stuff on a more emotional level, I think, but scientific research seems to think that the Levant might be closer. So it really depends how far you are from the Fusha, depending on your country and your dialect. But the academic research shows also that the difference between the dialects, whatever it is, and the Fusha is likely to be more different as Italian from Spanish. Or for instance, they even think that German and English are closer to each other than Fusha and dialects. So there is a big difference when you think of it like that, when you think, oh my God, German and English, we treat them as different languages. While merely Egyptian and Fusha, we say, oh, it's just a dialect. But linguistically speaking, when you measure the linguistic distance and all the other parameters, they are regarded, the dialects and the High Arabic, which is called Fusha, as different languages. Just psychologically, we don't talk about them like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying. And so now you have two children who are growing up in the United States. What is their experience of learning to read and write?
Yeah. So I have twins. They're almost 11, boy, girl, and my husband is German. So his mother tongue is German, my mother tongue is Egyptian Arabic, and we live in New York. So the language around us is English. We don't speak each other's languages, so our language of communication is English. When we had the kids, both of us were very keen on teaching our languages, and we immediately, each one of us would talk to the kids in their language. So I would, they were babies, and I'd tell them while I'm cooking everything in Arabic. He'd be sitting there, and if I direct any speech to them, it's in Arabic. He's directing in German. I remember when they were like 1.5, we'd go to a restaurant, and we're talking in English, but once we look at them, you see two languages would go through, and people would be sitting next to us. And I remember somebody's like, "What are you talking on this table?" The kids weren't talking yet. And we'd be like, yeah, we have English here, but the channels to the kids are too different. And people would be, I guess it's not so common that we're very committed, we're very disciplined. And then I started with the reading. I live in a Western environment where reading to your child since birth is appreciated. You feel it everywhere. You ride a subway, you find a mother reading to her child. You go to a bookstore, it's full of books. So I was keen to pick that up. I wasn't sure why I'm doing it so much because I wasn't yet academic about it. So I started buying, I already had some Arabic books, and I started reading them, and I realized what I'm reading is not what I want them to utter. And I found it a bit strange, but then I started, just translating on the spot, whatever I'm reading, till they got a bit older. And I realized when I saw, because my husband was doing the same thing in German, that with his books, the kids would finish his sentences. So if it's a rhyme book, he would, say the first half, because with the kids, you repeat the book many times.
Yeah.
And they would finish his sentences. And they don't do that with me, though. I'm the one who spends more time with them. And then, again, this whole, that the Arabic is different in the book than what I utter was a revelation. It's like, oh, I guess I'm saying different text every time, because every time I'm just translating on the spot.
Yeah.
So they don't have a consistency of a sentence that they know every night. We're going to read that sentence exactly as it is. And then I started translating and sticking stuff on the books, like written, so I could read the same text. And of course, at that point, they were doing like they were doing with him. And I think that's the beginning of me realizing, oh, this is an issue here. And I started translating all my books in written Arabic, sticking them. It's a very long story until making my own book, so I don't know if you want me to go in one go. But at that stage, what I was concerned about until they were almost 7 was giving them the oral knowledge of Arabic. I was not interested in literacy at all, as in reading. And I wasn't doing, hey, A,
it was
B,
more,
C. It was
more
just
for them to,
I want you to have the auditory knowledge of Arabic. Only when they started reading in English did I start doing literacy in Arabic. They had already known the concept of what a letter is, what a syllable is, and all that. And that's when I started shifting to, which was exactly this November would be 2 years since the first day they heard, and they're almost 11. since the first day they read A is Alif in Arabic was exactly 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you say it's a long journey, but so after that, I guess that was when you were conscious about that there was something to do with the way Arabic was written in books and and what you wanted to transmit to your children. So so is that what led you to then write books? What happened between that moment where you understood there was something to do and the moment where you published your first book, which is in Egyptian Arabic, I believe?
Yeah. So I published my first book. It went out to the market March 2020. It was during beginning of COVID.
Okay.
And at that point, I had already done my first academic paper, which was about reading to a child in like the importance of reading storybooks to children. And part of it was this idea of that when you make up the text every time, how that is not useful, and the benefits of consistency of reading text, the benefit of giving a parent a text that's written that when they come from work, they're not lazy. Oh my God, I'm going to look into that book. Imagine if you hold a Japanese book and you have to tell it to your kid every night in English.
Yeah.
It is a mental effort.
Yeah.
I remember I would say the story in different ways that they'd be like, hey, you didn't say, ooh, because I was supposed to scare them. And I'm like, okay, I forgot that part because it's not written.
Yeah.
So I had already published a paper at that just before. And then I was like, okay, this is a problem, not just for me, it's even a problem for kids back in Egypt. Like we have a very strange relationship for little children with the storybooks. And I tried to reach out to publishers to write in colloquial, and they weren't interested. And I needed to test this idea academically also. So then I was like, okay, I'll self-publish a book. And I did, and it was received very well. And I felt it was a confirmation, not to the academic importance of literacy in Ammiya at that stage, but it told me that parents were leading, like it makes reading more accessible to parents when it's in a language their child understands, and it's the language they are eager for them to utter. And
Yeah.
so that's how I ended up self-publishing the book. And then it was a success. So then I did another one and another one. And then by the third one, I had turned my interest to academics, to literacy. So I did storybooks, but then at some point I did a literacy book. And
Yeah.
because I knew I needed this stuff for my own children. So I was always creating the book I would like to see in the market, and publishers don't want to do. And I had the academic backing for it. And that's when I did a literacy book, and then wrote again some children books again.
Okay. Um, why weren't they interested? So you say it was a successful. Obviously, the books were good. Why weren't the publishers interested?
Well, they didn't know it was going to be a success, because now when you see publishers, first of all, like for instance, like a couple, 2 or 3 publishers are now doing an Ammiya now 5 years later. And Ammiya, when I say Ammiya, for those who don't want, it means the colloquial Egyptian. We have like 2 or 3 publishers. When I started, there was no one. You have big publishers in Egypt that are now marketing their storybook and like, oh, we wrote it in a classical Arabic, but it's so close to Ammiya. They realized, oh, people are actually buying this and want this. But they were never, I talked to the top publishers in Egypt, and none of them were willing to even consider it. But I think the market spoke. Like one of the bookstores, it's a main one in Egypt. It had my first book as a bestseller for 10 months, above even Dogman. It was showing every month, and it was the number
Wow.
one English and Arabic. Imagine Dogman, but I mean, it's in Egypt still. And mind you, it's still a small quantity, but out of all the books, children books they were selling, my book, Kenya Makan, was #1 for 10 months. I had screenshots of their Instagram account. So that's huge. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that it's because the storyline was great. I attribute it because you're writing in a language that I had parents would write over and over this expression. It's I read it and the child's eyes light up. It's never like that when I read Fusha. And parents realize that.
Yeah, because then you're talking in a language that they understand straight away. It's not trying to, or hearing a foreign language or trying to understand what mom or dad is saying.
Exactly. And when you start doing the academic research, and let's say you study, I don't know if you know the book author Julia Donaldson. Do you know her? She wrote The Buffalo. So I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I took the Harry Potters, and then I took Julia Donaldson, a couple of books that had American versions. And you
Yeah.
see that they change the American version from the English. So in the English version, they would say the witch had trousers. And then
Yeah.
the same book by Julia Donaldson in America, they use pants instead of trousers. Trash, rubbish. And you realize, oh, this is a thing. You're supposed to write a book, and both are English, pants and trousers. They don't say in America, hey, child, we call it trousers for now for the sake of the book. No, they actually rewrite the book and change those words. And I saw it from a number of publishers. I did a study of that. So you realize, oh, we even do worse. We don't just change a word. The whole book is in this other language. When Western societies where reading is loved by children are very careful to always give the child a language they can comprehend that's suitable for them, to not turn them off children books or books in general.
Okay. And in Arabic countries, do they have, so you said when you had your children, you saw around you that people like moms were raising to their children. But so did you have that when you grew up in Egypt? So did you
No,
no.
not at all. No, I didn't. We didn't grow up to this, what I see or what I do with my kids now, or what their friends, how they're brought up now. We didn't have a culture of your mom every night sitting next to you reading a book at all. And I would say most Egyptian society is still not like that. Like a
Okay.
very successful book in Egypt would sell 1,000 copies a year. And we're a country of 100 million people. That's nothing. Okay, so I'm just saying, of those who decided to read or were reluctant, they read more. But the culture of reading to your child a book is not something common in the Arab world. It might be increasing. I don't think there's data. I don't want to make my judgment based on social media. In the
Yeah.
end, the judgment should be how much print are you printing and able to sell? That's what tells me people are reading or not because
Yeah.
I saw 10 moms do an Instagram post. So, and we're still like at a max, maybe you print 2,000 copies and you sell them over a year and a half. That's still minute in the Arab world.
Okay. But I understand that there are some books that so before, so you said there was no publisher publishing in Armenia, but I understand that there are some adult books, books for all the children and adults that are published in Armenia. Is there a difference between why they for children?
Yeah, so just to correct, so when I started, there were those random single books, like somebody did a book
Ah,
and sold it here, but it wasn't a publisher or consistency, okay?
okay.
But when I wrote, one of the arguments that publishers would say, because really the fight is cultural, okay?
Yeah.
Or dogma, one of the probably like, how are we going to write Ameya? Like, think of Ameya as when they started writing Italian when the language was Latin. So you're like, yeah, but what's the spelling of that? We don't have a dictionary to tell us how the word should be written. But that argument is not really sincere, because those same publishers were, like you say, were publishing Ameya books for grown-ups for years. Like actually one of the biggest literature prize in Egypt is called the Sawiris Prize for Literature. And one of the years, an Ameya adult book won the literature prize of the whole country. So, so the reason why they actually don't do it, I think it's a fear. I find it unfounded fear, which is, this is a child. And if I give him a Ameya book, he's probably going to love it so much that he's not going to want to come close to the Fusha book. But the adults, we all had to go through the education system. And now it's like, okay, we learned Fusha. Maybe we're not all very good at it, but we did the schooling, and now we can give it to we can afford to give you a Ameya book because you already went through the education system. The other thing also, the child doesn't have a voice. So the child is not going to go in there and be like, no, I want Riham's book and I don't want that book. In the end, you're selling to a parent, and the parent is concerned. Why? Like, I've heard it a lot. Why would I read to my child in Ameya? He already speaks it. I should be reading to him in Fusha because it helps him in school. So you play to that, to parents,
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
reading for pleasure is not a concept that's very common. Still, reading
Okay.
a storybook is seen as educational still.
Okay. And so, okay, more broadly in general, so you said you are reading to your children, and there are lots of studies around it, but so two questions. Can you summarize what's the benefit of reading to our children first reading to our children regularly, and
Mm.
what's the benefit of reading books like yours that are in Ameya rather than Fusha?
Okay, so reading to children, there's so many benefits. I'm just gonna see what comes.
Yeah.
Like there's so much scientific research. It's like there's research that shows that it helps even with pain management because you give them this pleasure through storytelling. Pre-literacy skills, like the child gets acquainted with this thing called the book. They know that it opens like that. When I see a page,
Yeah.
there's a picture that tells a story, and when I turn the page, there's a continuation of the story. We think this is silly stuff, but this is academic research that shows that kids that go into school with a culture of reading do better. Vocabulary building. I mean, there's ample research that the stronger their vocabulary, the more their academic achievement is. There's even a research by Harvard that's it's a lab on dyslexia that shows that was mind-blowing, and it was like maybe 3-4 years ago, that when you read to a child before the age of 5, you rewire their brain networks, that not that you avoid dyslexia, but you kind of do a certain kind of rewiring to their brain because of the effort they have to make with connecting the language with the picture, with the plot, with the storyline, with the prediction, that you can rewire a brain to a certain way to kind of reduce the impact of dyslexia later. And that you can't do when they're 8. You have to do it in the first years of their life. So, I mean, I can go on forever on the benefits of reading to a child. In my kids' school, and they go to a kids' school in New York, now going to reading them in Ameya. I mean, I want to clarify, the word mother tongue is a very specific term. People use it in an emotional way. The mother tongue is the language that of the house. So my language, the mom's language with my kids was Egyptian Arabic. So that became their mother tongue. But if I'm an Egyptian who is living in New York and talking to my kids in English, then Arabic is not their mother tongue. You know, yes, it's my mother tongue. I can
Yeah.
speak it, but if I chose not to use it with my kids, then it's a foreign language to them. So
Yeah.
because people sometimes act like, oh, but it's their mother tongue. But I'll be like, I'll tell the mom, but have you ever spoken to them? No, but it's their mother tongue because it's my language. Yeah, but it's not theirs because you didn't present it as a mother tongue.
Yeah.
So for me, when I went to show you the extent, like when I went to the kids' school, when we were applying to their school and they were 4, they didn't speak a word of English. We live in New York. So in the interview, because it was a private school, I had to go in with them or their dad to translate the questions by the teacher in Arabic or German, depending which of us went in. And later, I was always asking the principal and the teachers, I don't want to speak English. Is it okay? They're like, continue with your mother tongue at home. Only when we start doing literacy, I need you to help them. But until now, all what you're doing is transferable skills. If they know how to think in their language of comfort, if they know how to look at a book, if they can retell the story, they have the skills to do it in English once we teach them in English. So I had a school that was confirming the research, which is like, you do your language, we're going to take care of English. And at some point when we need them to read every night, that's when we will need you to shift to English.
Okay, that's very helpful from the school as well. Because
Yes, it
we
was.
hear a lot of stories of school who say, but you need to speak more in English to your children because otherwise they'll be delayed, etc. So
I've
that's
never heard that from our pediatrician. I mean, our school is very, I mean, I even have an interview with the head of the school about this. And I asked him, like, how come you didn't, force me or ask me to do English? And he's like, why? I know you're giving them all those skills in your own language. I don't care. English they'll pick up. So I was lucky. And I knew, like, I also knew that is the right way to do it. So, and my husband was continuing German. It's not like even the house is Arabic. No, they had German and Egyptian Arabic, and then the English just happened. And within 6 months of their school, their English was perfect.
Yeah, thank you. And so another thing, so you talked about before the reluctance of some parents who say that if my child reads or hear and reads only dialect or Arabic, they won't be able to understand Fusha or to want to read Fusha, or, and so therefore to develop their language. How, so you're publishing books in Ameya. How is that helping this development of the vocabulary?
Okay, so with Fusha and Ammiya, there are commonalities and there are differences. So a common thing is script. The way the letters, starting from right to left, the sounds are very similar.
Yeah,
Maybe there's a couple of missing sounds in Ammiya that we don't use, but we tend to use them in Fusha. But the kha and the a and the qa, they exist, all these sounds in Ammiya. So when you're teaching your child Ammiya, you're already giving them all the sounds. When you're
yeah,
doing literacy in Ammiya, again, assuming that the child has the auditory knowledge of Ammiya already. So the idea with literacy, I think in any language, when you go to a German country, the children go to school and learn literacy in German. So in the language that they already know, they can already predict. When you go to France, the kids go to a school and learn ABC and cat and dog in French.
yeah,
And then you introduce the other languages. In Arabic, what happens is you go to school and all of a sudden, you know, the thing that you call bicycle, which is agala for Egyptians, is called duga, which is, let's say, daraga, something else. And that's your first encounter with writing that word. So it's not in your receptive vocabulary. So when you're teaching a child literacy, it should be using vocabulary and structures that are within their
they can
receptive
refer to.
language.
Yeah,
So they can, and what happens, you see, when a child is decoding, they are halfway predicting the word. If they're not able to predict the word, they have a hard time reading it. They will spell it out, but they have you know, if I'm reading at, and then, oh, cat, because you already know it, it's in your receptive vocabulary.
yeah,
So that's what you do when you introduce literacy to a child in Ammiya, if he already has the auditory knowledge. So again, that's a key thing. If your child doesn't speak Ammiya, then you might as well just do Fusha, doesn't matter.
yeah,
But if the child already has the language, then you're just, because writing and reading is just changing what you hear and say into scripture.
yeah,
So what happens is then, because that's how I got my kids to write and read very quickly, because they were, once they knew the letters, they were able to predict the sentences. They're all in Ammiya. They know those words. When they want to practice writing, I tell them, look out of the window and write me what you see. They would just write it. Yeah, maybe small spelling mistakes, but it's not like he writes a word, rubbish, and I'm like, no, it's called trash. That's what happens in our school. A child writes a word and the teacher in kindergarten, and the teacher will be like, no, that's not how we say it. We say it like this, because the teacher is giving them the Fusha word. And the child is like, I'm barely learning how to put the letters together, and you're introducing this new word to me. So what happens is when you do it in Ammiya, you're building on what the child already knows to teach him the letters, merging them, sentence structure. And once he's competent in that, and that is what mother tongue-based education is, then you start introducing the other language. So think of it, if you're in Germany and you learn German the first few years, and then you introduce in third grade English. Now, if you introduce English to a child in Japan who's never seen English scripture, is it going to be as easy as introducing it to a child in Germany? Of course, it's easier for the child in Germany, especially that you have many words that are common. Hand, it's hand. Foot, you know, you have all these common words and you have common letters, but your first entry to literacy is easier when it's in a language that's comfortable to you. So that's and that's what's called cross-linguistic transfer in academia. When you have competence in a language, you're able to transfer it to another language, let alone when both languages are using the same script, which is Ammiya and Fusha.
yeah. We have a comment from Uta, who is following us. So she has Swiss German as one of her home languages. And so she said it's the same with children who attend school in in the Swiss German part of Switzerland, which is then in Swiss High German with other terms, other syntax structures, etc. So,
yes, so Swiss German is the closest example, but still the Swiss German have it easier. So
Okay.
Swiss German is a bit like my husband, who's German. He goes to Switzerland and he can read the newspaper because it's written in High German. But when two Swiss people are talking, he doesn't understand them because they're talking in their own Swiss German dialect. I have seen examples like that Gruffalo book. I've seen it in Swiss German dialect. I still think the Swiss are holding on to teaching the child in High German right away. I don't know what the latest is, but it's a bit different because in Switzerland, the main language is High German, right? So it's a language that's alive. It's a language where people in Germany speak in. A
I
lot
see.
of Germans live in Switzerland and speak High German. You're exposed to it in your life. In the playground, you're a Swiss German kid who's a Swiss kid who's playing with a German kid, and you hear the language. But in Arabic, we have a very, very unique and peculiar case. Nobody lives life with Fusha. You will never go to a
Yeah.
playground anywhere in the Arab world and find two kids playing in Fusha. So our language is a bit, I don't want to say as obsolete as Latin, because it's not. We use it, but it is not a language you talk in. People who talk in it are religious scholars or university professors who do Arabic language, or teachers in a classroom, but you will not call your mother and talk to her in classical Arabic. You will not go to the dentist who's educated and you're educated and talk to each other in classical Arabic. But in Switzerland, you can go to a dentist who happens to be German and he speaks to you in High German. It's a living language to all society. So it's a bit different for the Swiss. We have it even harder because the High language is not spoken by anyone in real life, except in very specific academic setups.
And so when I was asking for people to share with me their challenges and questions that they wanted to talk about during this event, uh, I had one comment from a mom that shocked me at first when she said like her son didn't want to learn to read in Arabic.
Mm.
And she said like, how can I motivate my child to learn to read in a useless language?
Yeah.
And I found, oh wow, it's quite strong to say useless language, but what you describe is quite so it goes with this in the sense that we don't hear it around, it's just written. So if you read signs or if you read the menu in a restaurant, maybe you see it, but you won't hear people talking. And if you live in a country like a non-Arabic speaking country, then all the things that you might have in an Arabic speaking country, you don't see them, you don't hear it.
Mm.
So it stays just in school books, and it
Yeah.
becomes more like it's work. It's not necessarily something that I'm using in my daily life. So it can be even more difficult.
Yes. I'm not going to use the term useless because not to upset anybody,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's it does exist on TV. If you open the news, you're going to find it in Fusha. If in an interview between two intellectuals, they might throw in a bit of Fusha. So it exists. It's not like it doesn't happen, but it's not natural. I would ask any mother who lives abroad. Let's put Egyptians or Arabs in the Arab world aside, though there's a case to be made that their kids should be learning in Ammiya first. But let's ignore that and just talk about people who live like us abroad. You should ask your child first, yourself, why are you teaching your child Arabic? That's the main question. Am I teaching my child Arabic because I want him to know his religion? Then you're probably going to want to do Fusha because you want him to read the Quran, and all the religious books are probably going to be in Fusha. Are you doing it because you want him to joke and talk and communicate with people? And when I say communicate in Egypt, let's say, I'm not talking about talking to the ignorant or the people illiterate. No, with a grandmother, with the dentist, with the librarian to ask for a book, to go in a bookstore and ask them, do you have the latest book? All that is an Ammiya. If that's what you're going for, then you have to ask yourself, why am I teaching him Fusha? And so what I'm doing now is I spoke in my Ammiya until, we can watch soap operas in Ramadan, they fully understand it. Maybe I have to explain some complicated cultural stuff. So they have full auditory knowledge. They can express themselves, but it's weaker because they don't use it as much.
yeah.
And they can read and write Ammiya. If I show them a Fusha text, they will read it because they can decode.
Yeah.
But if it's a tough text with many different words, they don't understand. They can read it, but they don't understand what they're reading. Now, what I have become comfortable with is I gave them the skill that if they are older and want to learn Fusha, they have a very strong base. They have Ameya, they have all the common words, they know how to pronounce all the letters, they know how to read. They would just have to do the little bit extra work of acquainting themselves with the different structures and the different words. But I am not going to teach them Fusha because of what you say. What are they going to use it in America? Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
This has to be something like if my son is like, I want to work for the World Bank, and then he will want to learn Fusha because he wants to put it on his CV or whatever it is. But until then, I'm not going to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I will take him to the easiest step I can take him for him to take that.
Yeah, I guess that's also part of our role as parents is to get them to a place where then they can make choices,
Yes.
and then they need to put a little bit of extra to go in the direction they want to go to. But yeah, it's yeah. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
So I
to
would tell that
use
mother, you should try with Ameya. If he already knows of course, if he doesn't know anything about the language, then it's harder. Then, then it's
yeah,
like, you might as well teach him Japanese. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
But if he already speaks it and can understand it, and you start when you read, he has that light of, I'm reading something I actually understand. I think it will make it a bit easier to convince him. And you'll be doing a long shot to later Fusha if he decides he wants to take it on.
yeah. I guess it's the same with any language. We need to motivate our children to see why it can be beneficial for them to be able to read. And I remember when I started teaching my sons, so my eldest was 5 years old. Yeah, I wanted to teach him to read and write in French. Uh, and he was fine doing all the games we're doing, but because he didn't see the like more than just having fun in the game, he wasn't really interested in reading. And later on, when he got interested in reading, when he started to be able to decipher a bit, and he was taking Dogman, so number two, Dogman. So he was reading the onomatopoeia, so simple things, and little by little he started to build up his fluency and to be able to read more. So it's a bit what you're saying that with Ameya you can get them to develop the skills that then will help them uh, go and learn Fusha or yeah. So to
Yeah,
start
and
with
I want
what
to
they
be
know.
honest about something because I know, like, with all the positive parenting things, it's not an easy ride. I mean, why would a 2-year-old no, 2-year-old is easy because you're still, reading a story and it's fun. But why would a 7-year-old sit next to me and start, picking up these letters and write and read and convince him that this is good for you? Of course, that didn't happen. I was forcing it. It was like to me, the mental state that me and my husband have is, and we both are like that naturally, I guess, is this is like my child saying, I don't want to do math in school. It's not an option. Like, we have to do the minimum of math. There's no such thing. I go through schooling without doing math. Okay. So that's how I dealt with my language. I was like, okay, Sunday mornings, you like it or not, we're doing Arabic. Sometimes it's ugly,
Yeah,
sometimes it's not. Sometimes I say, like, okay, today we're doing the test, and they get excited, they're being tested. And sometimes we go get a book afterwards, and sometimes I don't always bribe them into this. And sometimes, like, you're doing it because we're doing it, and that's it. So it's a mental state also that I'm not the parent who's like, oh, he has to love every moment of it. No, you don't think like that when you're doing math with your kid. You like it, you don't. We just have to do the minimum. So that's the first thing I would say. It hasn't been an easy ride, but when they come to that little light of realizing I read a whole book, they get really excited. But then they lose the excitement when I get them a more difficult book. They again are resisting because now we're doing a longer book. I'm like, I don't want to do it. But once we finish it, like this week, I got a long book and they were miserable. Every morning before school, 10 minutes, I was like, you read me 2 lines. And now when we reread it, they're like, hey, I read it all in one seating. So there's this push thing that is being forced. And the most thing I've heard about multilingual thing from anybody in my life, and that's what I have heard, is always, people who tell you, I really wish my parents had insisted on talking to me and giving me the language. Nobody sits there and says, oh, I'm so glad my mom never taught me Arabic. Everybody's like, oh, she should have, like our piano teacher is Brazilian. She's like, my parents, they gave up when I resisted. They gave up so quickly. They should have insisted. I just want to remind people that that's how it is. One of those things they'll thank you later.
It's also like you said, like you force them, but I think in a way you didn't just force them, but that's the way we do it and that's it. Because you chose
Met
to
them.
go the way of Ameya, not Fusha. So
Yes.
there is some adaptation to your children as well.
Yes, yes, I was reasonable. Like, I
Yeah.
am not going to give them a language that is alien to them and I tell them, hey, this is Arabic, come on, let's do this. No, of course, I met them where I think it's fair for a child, the kind of stuff they should be exposed to. That's why I never sent them to an Arabic school. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this to them. I mean, I want them still to be smart and reading stuff and questioning. Like, I remember reading books and reading when I was young. I was like, I don't even understand what I'm reading, but I'm reading. And my mom's like, yeah, okay, good, you decoded. I don't want my kid to accept that you can read stuff that you don't understand. That's not something, a state I want you to be.
Yeah. And so, because we don't have that much time left, I wanted to talk about your books because
Yeah.
you published these books. Could you tell us a bit about them? So what kind of stories you wrote?
Yeah.
What's the idea, age group, and where people can buy them as well?
So I have them here. I'm not gonna go on full display, but I'll show you one of them. So this is a series of part 1 and part 2. It's called Kenya Makan, which means once upon a time. And it's like a collection of storybooks. And in those series, what I do is I take classical stories that are in the public domain. So one of them is, you might know it, it's Japanese origin, Inch Prince, you know, the little prince. Really?
Ah, yeah,
Inch.
yeah,
And he's little and he goes to the city and stuff.
yeah,
So I take them and I write them in Egyptian Arabic and in rhyme. And I change a little bit. So sometimes, let's take one that people know. Let's say, what's her name? Little Red Riding Hood. So I would change, and instead of traditionally he swallows Little Red Riding Hood and you slaughter his belly and take her out, I, of course, change those brutal scenes and make it something that is more modern. Let's say if a story, most classical stories, the protagonists are male, I would change and make some of them female and
yeah,
keep still the story. And I would do the animation or illustration era more fits my culture. So I imagine those classical stories within the Arabic culture and draw people that look more Egyptian or Arab. So that's the kind of book. Another book that I did are my own storylines. So those are single story book. I did 3 of those. And one of them my latest book was one of the new Egyptian Arabic publishers. It's called Asfura, which is this book. So that's my latest. So I'm so happy. Now I have a publisher who I can just do a book, which is huge that she picked this up, and the publisher is doing fantastic. And my dearest book is this one, which was my literacy book. And again, that's choosing words that are all common between Ammiya and Fusha. So when I'm teaching my child, let's say I have a scene with all these words that you can find they are common between Ammiya and Fusha, because my idea was I want that book to go to schools. And I know schools are not yet on board on how useful Ammiya is as a step to Fusha. So I was okay, let me use words that are common. So I'll ignore all those other words that change across both dialects and use this one. So that one I had to do. That was the book. Once I had it in my hand, I started literacy with my kids.
Okay. Ah, thank you very
And
much.
where they're sold,
Yeah.
to be honest, they're sold in Egypt. The website states all the bookstores, and some of them ship abroad and some of them don't. But I haven't distributed in what we call the West.
Okay.
So most my clients end up getting it when they go to Egypt, and a few of them would order and ship it from the bookstores in Egypt.
Okay. Thank you very much. And to finish, what would be one thing you would like teachers and parents, or maybe 2 different messages if it's different, but what would you like them to know about reading and writing in Arabic, or
Okay.
to remember, to take
To
away?
parents, I would say, if you really care about this, talk to your child from birth in only Arabic. There is nothing else. Don't even bother with academics until later, with literacy, when they learn it in the language of the country you're living. So if you're in France, start teaching Arabic literacy, which meaning the alphabet and stuff, only when they already started reading in French, because it's easier to have the school take care of it. But the thing that is crucial is to build the auditory knowledge of the language so that when he starts learning literacy, it is on a base of words and structures that are easy for them. So
Yeah.
that's if there's one advice I give to parents is that talk, 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 make sure that they are able to know the language.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's teachers and parents. Also manage your expectations when you're teaching your kid. Like I've had different expectations at different stages. At some point I was insisting you answer me in Arabic. That was okay until they were 5. But at some point they went to school and they had a full life, rich with vocabulary. They would talk about, let's say, migration, and they, mom, and we read a story about migrants and at the border. I can't tell them to tell me the story in Arabic. They don't know what border is. They don't know what immigrant is. So you have to be fair in your expectations. So you come to a point where I realized, and I remember I was very frustrated. I was like, I want them to tell me what they've learned, but I don't want to turn it down. Okay, wait, migration means this, border means this. So you have to accept it just won't work. At some point, you will have to settle for a weak level. And
also
and
I was
accept
going to
that they
say,
will pick it up later on their own effort. You just give whatever you can. And also remember, last thing is that kids, like language is a skill. So a talent. Some people have it and some people don't. Yeah, Noam Chomsky himself said he failed to learn a second language, and he's the biggest linguist in the world. He said he only speaks English. He failed to learn German. He's just bad at languages. So also when you're comparing your kid to the one next door, some kids are just not talented, like in art. Some are not. I'm one of those. I don't pick language easily.
okay. Thank you very much. That was really enriching. And so we come to the end of the first day of the Grand Multiliteracy event. We still have 2 days. We start tomorrow at 11. 11 UK time. So if you want to join me in the introductory talk for the second day, and in 15, oh no, at 7 o'clock UK time, so in about 30 minutes, I'm going to be debriefing about today. So if you want to join me and tell me as well what you picked up from what the different speakers were saying, feel free to join. Thank you very much again, Riham, for your time and for talking about what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for this amazing conference. I've listened to like 2 of the talks earlier, and I'm going to catch up on the rest. And it's a very important topic, and you're providing excellent information. So thank you.
Thank you. And yes, so for the people who are following, if you don't catch us live, don't worry. It all stays on my YouTube channel, so you can catch up later.